Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 52. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are going to be having a Scovillian Spicy Extract team. Now Scovillian is probably my favorite Pokemon to come out of Gen 9 just because I really like it thematically as both a fire and grass type, and it also gets a pretty nutty signature move called Spicy Extract, which will raise the attack of your target by 2, but it also lowers their defense by 2, which means that it has a lot of use both as a utility move for your own Pokemon, but since it's 100% accurate, and actually it never misses, not that that's just 100% accurate, you can also use it into the opponent in order to mostly lower the defense of like special attackers that don't value the attack boost. But let's talk a little bit more about Scovillian, as our Scovillian is going to be running the Choice Scarf, which means that our speed is going to be multiplied by 1.5 times, but we also have Chlorophyll, which means that if we get Sun Up with Scovillian on the field, Scovillian is more than likely going to be the fastest thing on the field. There's nothing that's keeping up with Scovillian except for other like Choice Scarf Mons that are in Tailwind. And even with Scovillian, we can exert a lot of pressure if we need to just like one-hit KO something without using the Spicy Extract, as we do have the Overheat, which will do a lot of damage in Sun, but will cause us to get a special attack drop by 2, but we also have the option to go for the Stab Solar Beam on the Sun, which won't take a turn to charge. And in case whatever we're facing doesn't really mind the Overheat or the Solar Beam, we do have the option to go for the Super Fang, which will cut in half whatever Pokemon we use it into, which can help pick up some 2-hit KOs. And of course, since we're Choice Scarf, we should be using Terra Ghost on Scovillian, so that way Scovillian can dodge a Fake Out. Next up, we got Spiritomb, and I decided to include Spiritomb on this team since I thought we were including Torkoal. It would be nice to have a Trick Room option. But Spiritomb also gives us some utility in the Spicy Extract strategy because it has the move Foul Play, and since Foul Play uses the target's attack stat, if we use Spicy Extract into an opponent and then click Foul Play into that opponent, the damage that Foul Play does will be multiplied by 4 times, since we are doubling the opponent's attack and we are cutting in half their defense. That multiplies out to a 4 times damage increase on Foul Play, which is pretty nutty. But to also help support the team, we have the option for going for the Will-O-Wisp for lowering the base power of the opponent's physical moves on one Pokemon, and we just have the Helping Hand in case we need a little bit more damage on whatever Pokemon is next to Spiritomb. And the nice thing about Spiritomb is that it has the ability Infiltrator, so even if a Pokemon does set up a Substitute or a Reflect or even like a Safeguard, Spiritomb just gets to ignore all of those, which is pretty handy. And lastly, we're using the Guava Berry on Spiritomb just to get Spiritomb a little bit of extra health whenever it gets knocked down. And we're using Terra Fire mostly because inside of Trick Room, Terra Fire is the best thing for it, as if we're facing Psy Spam, Spiritomb is really good. But if we're also facing like an opposing Torkoal, we can Terra Fire in front of the Torkoal to help better deal with it. Next up, we have Torkoal, and Torkoal is going to be our Sunsetter, but also our main Trick Room component, as we're stacking Torkoal entirely in Fire-type damage. So we're going for that Eruption and Heat Wave combo with our Charcoal item, which will boost the power of Fire-type attacks, and we are Terra Fire, but we also have the Earth power in order to be opposing Torkoals. Pretty simple Torkoal set that we've used before, there's really nothing new here. Next up, we got Dragapult, and Dragapult is working with the Spicy Extract strategy because it has the ability Clear Body, which means that we will negate all forms of stat dropping on Dragapult that Dragapult doesn't cause to itself. But this means that we can lead Scovillian and Dragapult, and since Scovillian is Choice Scarf, it will be faster than Dragapult, so we can side Spicy Extract into Dragapult, and Dragapult will get a free ×2 attack boost. And all of Dragapult's moves are coverage options, as we have its signature move Dragon Darts, and we also have the Phantom Force for the Ghost type damage, and I decided to go Terra Fighting Terra Blast, since Steel types can be a little difficult to deal with on this team, depending on if Scovillian or Torkoal can't deal with them. So having that Terra Fighting Terra Blast really does make the difference, and we also have the Sucker Punch for just a bit of priority, and we're Focus Sash so that we can always take a hit, but mostly just because whenever we're using Scovillian and Dragapult, it's really nice to be able to side Spicy Extract attacks Dragapult and then go for the Phantom Force, because if we Phantom Force knock out the Pokemon that we are choosing to knock out with Dragapult, and then Dragapult comes back out of the Phantom Force, it means that the Pokemon that was next to the Pokemon that we knocked out is only going to be able to at most proc the Focus Sash on Dragapult, and we can Spicy Extract into that Pokemon on turn 2 whenever Dragapult attacks to make it so that Dragapult can just chain 2 KOs pretty much. Next up we got Metagross, and Metagross is here for mostly the same reason as Dragapult, as it is a clear body user, but also it's been 52 videos and we somehow haven't used a Metagross yet, which I'm kind of proud of, but Metagross is cool. I like Metagross a lot, but I don't know how it took 52 videos for us to get a Metagross on a team. But our Metagross is going to be mostly tanky, as we're going to be using Assault Vest so that we can take special attacks, and we're going to have our coverage moves in the form of Hard Press, which is really strong whenever the opponent is at full health, and if we use the Spicy Extract into Metagross, that means that we can pretty much knock out like most neutral Mons with the Hard Press. And anything that the Hard Press doesn't knock out, we can then follow up with the Bullet Punch in order to get them, and Bullet Punch is just good priority overall. And we also have the Psychic Fangs, which is again good stab damage, and allows us to break the opponent's screens. And we just have the Stomping Tantrum for a bit of tight coverage, or if something wants to fake out Metagross, then we can punish them with the Stomping Tantrum. And we're Terra Water on Metagross because Water gives us a ton of good resistances. And lastly, I decided to slot Swanna onto this team, mostly because I don't think there's another team where we'll get to use Swanna. But Swanna is a bit of a unique Pokemon because it gets the ability Big Pex, and Big Pex prevents other Pokemon from lowering the Pokemon's defense. So when we Spicy Extract into Swanna, it'll pretty much be like it has the Clear Body ability, where we will get the attack boost from the Spicy Extract, but we won't get the defense drop. And Swanna has some nice type coverage, as we do have water type moves that we hopefully are not using in the sun, because Swanna doesn't really benefit from the sun at all. But if the opponent is trying to bring rain teams and we lose the Weather War, it is nice to have Swanna in the back to help clean up with its water type moves. As we're just going to be rocking Stab Liquidation, Stab Brave Bird, which will do recoil to us, and with our Life Orb, we are doing considerable recoil with Swanna, but hopefully Swanna's at least getting the KOs that we need it to get. And then we do also have the knockoff option on Swanna for getting rid of the opponent's items. However, I was kind of thinking of running just Terra Blast, Terra Ground on Swanna, but if you ever make this team, you can play around with it a little bit. By no means is the Swanna set definitive. It's just, I'm not exactly sure what the best Swanna set could be, so we're just going with this one. And with the Life Orb, you can afford to do a lot of good damage, and Terra Ground is mostly just here to keep us from getting hit by rock type moves and electric type moves for super effective damage. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. So first up, we have an opposing Sun team where they have the Lilycole option, but they also might have some slower components in like the Gallade in order to keep from like losing speed control. But I decided to lead Scovillian and Dragapult, and they decide to lead Torkoal and Hisuian Lilligant, which I am perfectly fine with. And we overheat the Lilligant, but it is Sash, so we don't get to KO Lilligant here. And they after you Torkoal, and they get the full damage Eruption, which is going to knock out Scovillian. And Dragapult is going to enter the Phantom Force here, as now we get to bring in Metagross, and Metagross is just going to Terra Water and Bullet Punch into Lilligant in order to get rid of it. And we Phantom Force Torkoal for some pretty good damage as the Eruption come out, but Torkoal is currently at less health, so it's not going to KO either Pokemon. And they Terra Flying their Torkoal, which I was a bit surprised by, but Dragapult right now is the fastest thing on the field, and they catch the Stomping Tantrum luckily with that Terra Flying as Torkoal tries to Earth Power Metagross, but Metagross is Assault Vest, so we don't gotta worry about that too much. Phantom Force comes down to a Moongus, and we Psychic Fangs into Torkoal to get good damage into both, and Torkoal's just kind of uselessly clicking Eruption because it's probably Choice Specs actually it's not Choice Specs because it clicked Earth Power, but we get to Dragon Darts down Amoonguss here, and then Psychic Fangs is going to pick up the Torkoal slot, as now as it's just Goldango, and we get a little bit of Sucker Punch damage with Dragapult before Dragapult gets knocked out, but Goldango was never going to knock out Metagross this turn, so Metagross just gets to go for that Stomping Tantrum to finish off the Goldango. Here we have like pretty much a full Trick Room team, or at least definitely a hard Trick Room team, as they have 3 different components that can set up Trick Room, and the Mimikyu, possibly the Gardevoir, and the Hatterene. And their Amoonguss for redirection for getting up their Trick Room is pretty safe here. They can also just use Incineroar to fake out. So the battle starts off, they lead Mimikyu and Incineroar, which isn't the worst lead for us, because I led Metagross here, and I figured that Incineroar is probably not going to fake out, and even if it does, it wouldn't be that
much of a deal, as they would get a Trick Room next turn, and Metagross is currently fine. So we just decide to Spicy Extract and then get rid of the Incineroar, as Conkeldurr reveals that it is Rock Slide, and the Rock Slide actually does a good bit into Dragapult. But they use Mimikyu to taunt the Dragapult as Metagross KO'd the Conkeldurr with the Psychic Fangs, and they don't want Hatterene to just die to a Steel-type move, so they get the Grass Terra, and Grass Terra is probably the one Terra that saved them there, other than, like, Terra Fire. But Mimikyu appears to not have a Ghost-type move as it decides to play rough into the Metagross, but now we can get the Torkoal in while they have set up Trick Room for us pretty much, as they don't have anything slower than Torkoal. And Mimikyu's actually eject button, but we Bullet Punch the Mimikyu in order to break its disguise, so Torkoal just gets to click Eruption into both and end the game there. Here we have a Mouse Ape Rain team, but they also have Sinistcha for perhaps redirection and healing and maybe setting up the Trick Room, and Hydreigon is just a really threatening Pokemon if we can't get the call right on when it decides to terrestrialize. So we lead Scovillian and Dragapult, because I feel like that's my best lead into both Pelipper Arc and Mouse Ape, and they do decide to lead Pelipper, so I just go for that Spicy Extract Terra Fighting, and we get Terra Blast in order to knock out the Archaludon, who I thought was the biggest threat to what we have in the back, and they Hurricane into Scovillian, but I'm perfectly fine with that, as now we get to bring in Swanna here, and they Terra Steel their Hydreigon, which I could have just Terra Blasted into the Hydreigon, but I thought they might protect Hydreigon this turn, and then try to Tailwind with Pelipper. But we Swanna at least gets the Brave Bird, the Pelipper's Dragon Darts comes out into both slots, and now they bring in Sinistcha, so they do have redirection possibilities, so I Phantom Forced in order to knock out the Sinistcha. Since Dragapult is the Focus Sash, we're not too worried here. Sinistcha goes for the Machagacha, and they crit Swanna, which means that they do a lot of damage to Swanna, but Swanna at least lives. We get the Phantom Force into the Sinistcha, and the Hydreigon is faster than the Dragapult, which means that they are Speed Nature Hydreigon, but Swanna gets the critical hit Liquidation, which Dragapult would have been faster next turn, and we still have one Pokemon in the back, but Swanna did not need to go that hard in that moment. Next up, we have a fair mix of Mons that mostly all thrive under Whimsicott, like Septoan for them, and then them just like all being naturally speedier than the other Pokemon, except for maybe Magnezone, who prefers to be like analytic. But I decided to lead Spiritomb and Dragapult here, seeing as maybe we could get up a Trick Room, and they led Hydreigon and Magnezone, which I was perfectly fine with. I tried Terra Blasting into Hydreigon this time in order to KO it, but they missed Dragapult here and the Electro Web, but the miss is actually worse for us, because I wish Dragapult would have gotten knocked out so that we could just swap into Torkoal and then start attacking things with Torkoal, but I figured I might as well try to Sucker Punch the Hydreigon in order to get rid of it. But they yet again Thunderbolt into Dragapult, but they don't manage to knock out the Dragapult, which we're kind of just sitting here. I decided to double into the Magnezone just in case it's sturdy, so that when we bring in Torkoal, we can get some good turns of Trick Room. And they tried taunting into Spiritomb, but Spiritomb is a dark type, so it doesn't care about that. As I Helping Hand into the Torkoal, but I really should have doubled the Whimsicott, as I didn't think about it being Sash, and get the full health Eruption here off of Torkoal. That does some decent shit to Garchomp, and we foul play the Garchomp, but that doesn't manage to take it out. But the Garchomp Earthquakes into both slots, doesn't KO either of our Mons, and Spiritomb gets to eat its Agua Berry as the Garchomp KOs itself with its Life Orb. But now they have their Terra Fire Hydreigon on the field, and they kind of call it correctly here into Spiritomb. I mean, their most optimal move is just double attacking with both Pokemon. But now we get to bring in the Metagross, who can Bullet Punch into the Whimsicott in order to take it out. And they decide to Dark Pulse into Metagross, but we get the Heat Wave into the Hydreigon, which means that Bullet Punch from Metagross probably would have picked off the Hydreigon here. Next up, we have another Pelipper, Basculegion, Arc Rain team, but they also have the Salamence, who can do like insane Hurricane things, and Kingambit getting set up with Sucker Punch in front of most of our Mons that don't actually, nothing on this team resists Dark now that I look at it. But we lead Scovillian and Spiritomb here, and they lead the Basculegion and Pelipper, which means that they immediately set up their Rain. But we immediately get to swap in Torkoal in order to disrupt their Rain, and they protect Pelipper, but we weren't attacking Pelipper. We were attacking Basculegion with the Solar Beam here in order to get rid of it and one shot, and the opponent just decides to forfeit right off of that, which, I mean, sure. Here we have a bit of a sand team, as they have the Tyranitar to set up their sand, but they have Garganacl, who can be really stally inside the sand because it doesn't take the sand chip, and their Mandibuzz is probably Overcoat so that it also doesn't take sand chip, and Gastrodon can negate the water type moves used against the opponent. So they decide to lead Garganacl and Mandibuzz, but I'm perfectly fine with that, as I decide to lead Scovillian and Metagross. And they swap into Tyranitar here, but I decided to spicy extract the Garganacl specifically, because I thought the Mandibuzz might have foul play, and if we used the side spicy extract into Metagross, we would cause their foul play to deal double damage into Metagross, while already Metagross is an attacker Pokemon, and it is weak to the foul play, so I didn't... Well, I wanted Metagross to have the highest chance to live the foul play as possible, so I decided to spicy extract the Garganacl anyways. Seeing as Garganacl probably wasn't doing much physical damage, but we get the hard press into Garganacl, and that is going to KO it in one hit, and the opponent just decides to hard forfeit off of that. And lastly, we have a battle against another rain team here, but they're using Politoed instead of Pelipper, but they also have the Chinchino, who can, like, skill link, side proc the Archaludon's stamina. And they have two slower pieces in, like, the Ursaluna and the Vikavolt, which both kind of keep me from setting up Trick Room. As even if we did get Torkoal in under Trick Room, they could just, like, swap in Politoed and then have their Ursaluna or Vikavolt do a lot of damage to Torkoal. So I wasn't really quite sure what to lead, but the opponent leads Basculegion and Archaludon, and we lead Dragapult and Scovillian, as I feel like that was our safest option. And they immediately decide to swap in Politoed for the Rain, but we side Spicy Extract Dragapult here, and we Phantom Force into Politoed, as Archaludon does go for the Electro Shot now that it's in Rain, but it misses Dragapult. So I felt really safe on this first turn, because I figured if Basculegion was going to stay in and they swapped Archaludon out instead, then the Basculegion was probably going to attack into Dragapult, who would at least have the Focus Sash, and if they attacked into Scovillian, that's not the worst thing in the world, because Dragapult gets to keep its Focus Sash intact. But I think the better option for us was them swapping the Basculegion out for Politoed, as we did target that slot with the Phantom Force, and if we can get rid of their Rain, that means that we'll have control of weather for the rest of the game. So I Spicy Extract into the Archaludon because it doesn't value the attack boost, and it definitely does not value the defense drop, and they go for the Electro Shot again, but this time it goes into Dragapult, and that's not even going to proc our Focus Sash. So I decided to swap in Torkoal here in order to get rid of their Rain, as we Phantom Force with the Dragapult, as Dragon Pulse is going to take down the Torkoal, since Archaludon's at ×2 at this point. And now we get to bring in Scovillian, and they predicted that I was going to Phantom Force into the Basculegion, so they swapped in a normal type here. But I was actually Phantom Forcing into the Archaludon, not that it matters, because Solar Beam just full on gets to take out the Ursaluna since it's a ground type. And with that, the game is over, because the Scovillian's just going to Solar Beam into the Basculegion since we won the Weather War. So yeah, that was the Spicy Extract Scovillian team. I don't think that this is the perfect Spicy Extract Scovillian team, as we didn't get like a Clear Amulet on any Pokemon, because Clear Amulet works the same way as Clear Body. And perhaps trying to put Swanna on this team is a little bit greedy, but I mean, when are we ever going to get to use Swanna again? But I really like this strategy, mostly because I have a high bias against Scovillian, and I just like side attacking my Pokemon in order to increase their attack power, and then just having them sweep the game. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things will help me out an absolute ton, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.